Good evening, and welcome to the LOTUS Show.
My name is Daughter Jacqueline Netherland, and I am out of Moon Court number 22, Oasis of Memphis, Desert of Tennessee.
I'm delighted to meet both of you young people, and you've got to remember you're young people if you're not 94 years old.
Great. My name is Jerome Williams, and I'm out of Alpha Root Temple out of Columbus, Georgia.
Okay? It's nice knowing both of you.
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Well, we're going to introduce you to our LOTUS audience. We want our audience to know we have the grandmother of Juneteenth Day with us, Mrs. Opal Lee.
Not only is she the grandmother of Juneteenth, but she's a retired teacher.
Yes.
She's a counselor. She's also an activist. Very, very busy in her community.
Yes, she is. She is a phenomenal woman.
Phenomenal?
Yes.
They said she says she's 94 years old, but she doesn't look 94.
No, you don't.
Well, there are days when I feel 94, when the arthritis and the, what is this, carpal tunnel and the something else, but you just ignore them. Because if you got work to do, they just go by the wayside.
Absolutely. Tell us something about yourself.
Where do you want me to start?
From the beginning.
Well, I was born in Marshall, Texas. That's close to the Louisiana border. Shreveport's 30 miles to the east. And for 12 years, it was just ideal. You know, my parents, my dad had built a house, and that's a story in itself because he met my mother in high school, Central High in Marshall, and I asked her to marry him, and she said, you have to ask Papa, you know, like, and so he followed her to Texarkana and asked her dad, and the dad, who is a Baptist minister, circuit riding, you know, but mischievous as all get out. And he said to him, you sure you want this one? As if he had some others, and he did, that he could choose from. Well, before he left, my mom drew for him a house she wanted. And she didn't hear from him for 2 years. And he came back and told her he'd build that house in Marshall, Texas. So that's where I was born. I wanted to go to kindergarten. My mom wanted me to go, but I wasn't of the right age, you know? But finally, Mom persuaded the lady to send me to kindergarten. After a time, the lady told Mother she had to come get me because I was biting, scratching, and worrying the hell out to other kids. But it was during the Christmas season, and the kids were falling out with the flu and the this, that, and the other. And bad as I was, I had learned all their parts. So the Christmas play went right on with me saying everybody's part that wasn't there. After that, I could do no wrong, you know?
Absolutely. You had a photogenic memory. Outstanding.
My father lost a job during the Depression, and he left Marshall for Fort Worth, Texas, to find work. He was going to send for his family, but he never quite got around to doing it. So my mom sold all the possessions, cow and the pigs and pigeons, and for train fare for me, my two brothers, and herself. If we got to Fort Worth on Saturday, my mom was working in somebody's kitchen on Sunday.
She was a go-getter.
Oh,
Hard worker.
really, we had moved in with friends, and they the father was the caretaker of this huge 3-story building house that had been somebody's home, but they turned it into a medical library. And so he was the caretaker. And we lived with his wife and 2 children, and we called it living in service in the house behind the big house. We were there 6 weeks, and I went to the elementary school in the area, and it was called Cooper Street.
Okay.
Do you know I ended up teaching at Cooper Street for about 15 years?
Really?
Oh, wow.
Went back to where you got your first education from.
Yeah.
Went back to your roots. Okay.
So we stayed on that side of town about 6 weeks, and then my father found out we were there. My parents found a place on the south side, and we moved. My mom had a fall on a city bus, and she was compensated for it, and she made a down payment on a house. And do you know, on the 19th of June, 1939, people didn't want us there, and the paper says with 500 of them, and the police were there, but the police couldn't control the mob. They tore that place asunder. They pulled out the furniture and burned it. My parents had sent us to friends several blocks away, and they left under cover of darkness. They never, ever discussed it with us, but they worked and bought another house. People ask me where you get the tenacity that you have. Well, I think it goes back to my grandpa, because Mother says I was more like him than any of his 19 children. She was the 5th child, but he was a go-getter.
Yes.
He had 40 acres, but he would move around and he would see what the others had. And when I was a little one, I heard him talk about golf courses and tennis courts and indoor plumbing, things of that nature that he wanted his family and his community to have. And he lost the house by fire. He built another one in record times. He and his sons and the neighbors put up a house, and that house had a bathroom.
Really?
We still had to put out water in this big black wash pot and put a fire around it, take a bucket of water, take it and put it in the tin tub in the bathroom, but there was no plumbing. So Mom says I was more like Grandpa than any of his 19 children. And so I think it's in my DNA, understand?
To be resilient, yes ma'am. So how did that traumatic experience that you endured as a child impact you to be the activist that you are today?
I'm not sure, except that my grandfather, my mother, a grandfather would take people to my grandma. Her name was Maddie, and my mom's name was Maddie. And he'd say, Madsy, find a place, give him something to eat, find a place for him, give him a job to do, because everybody had a job. I don't care how small you are, you had something you had to do. It was your responsibility. And when my mom married and moved to Marshall, he would send people up there, tell her to give them a place to stay till they could get on their feet. So it's always been that we had to do something for others, not just our own.
Well, may I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Did you ever believe that Juneteenth Day will become a federal holiday within your lifetime? Did you ever think that would happen?
Well, Dr. Ronald Myers is responsible for Juneteenth actually being a federal holiday. Dr. Myers was a Baptist minister, a medical doctor, and a jazz musician all rolled into one. And he's responsible for about 43 of the states having Juneteenth festivals of some sort or another. And so when he sort of recruited me, and I believe the same thing he did, and he's passed on now, God rest his soul, but I just felt like Juneteenth, more people needed to know about it than did. And so, when I was about 89, I'd been doing festivals for 30, 40 years, but when I was about 89, I don't know whether I got restless or what, and I kept talking to people about it, and I got my pastor of my church, Baker Chapel AME Church, and a county commissioner, a school board member, the musicians and people, and we just had a little ceremony, and they started me off from the church walking 2.5 miles. That was to symbolize that the enslaved weren't freed for 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation in Texas, and there were 250,000 of them in Texas. The plantation owners had brought many of them to Texas during a war because they felt like they'd come back and get them after the war, but it didn't happen like that. And so the 2.5 miles that I walked, that day, the next day I started where I left off. And I walked Fort Worth, Arlington, Grand Prairie, Dallas, Box Spring, Joppa, 2.5 miles each time. Begin where I left off. But my team decided that I couldn't do it like that because somebody had promised us an RV so I'd have a place to rest, not have to go to the hotels and whatnot. And they reneged.
Oh my goodness.
They decided that what I was doing was too political. So my team says you only go where they have Juneteenth festivals or observances, and you will only go where you are invited. I was invited all over these United States. Shreveport, Texarkana, Little Rock, Denver, Colorado. I was invited to Madison, Wisconsin, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Atlanta, Chicago. I mean, if I tell you I was invited all over the place, the Carolinas. And so, if I started September 2016, I actually got to Washington January 2017. Well, we'd asked President Obama to walk with us from the Frederick Douglass House to the Capitol, but he was in Chicago. I didn't get what I wanted, but I kept on walking and I kept on talking. And we took Congress 1,500,000 signatures. That let people know that it wasn't just this little old lady in tennis shoes that wanted to make it a national holiday. And the Senate was going to pass the bill, and one lone senator dissented. That man had offered a bill that would have made Juneteenth a holiday instead of Columbus Day, and it didn't pass.
Oh, wow.
And so when it was his turn to vote for this bill, he didn't do it. The bill died. The bill in the House died. I can't say that I was dejected, but I sure didn't feel good.
Okay.
And then I ended up at the National Press Club in Washington this past spring, and that very same day, the Senate authored another Juneteenth bill, and so did the House author another Juneteenth bill, and we were off and running again. And when the White House called and said the president would sign the bill, if he called on Thursday and we had to be there on Friday, I was ecstatic. I just don't know how I felt. I could have done a holy dance.
Absolutely.
Oh, it was wonderful. And to have the president sign the bill, and I got one of the pens that he signed it with. And then we went home to our festival the next day, which was the 19th of June. And what I've done for the past 2 Juneteenths because of the virus, we formed a caravan as opposed to the parades we were used to having.
Right.
And the first time I did it, I thought we'd have 15 cars to follow me as I walked that 2.5 miles. We had 300 cars.
Oh my, that was in the caravan?
300 cars
Oh wow, okay.
to follow me that 2.5 miles. This time, no room for cars. I'm sure there were cars, but the people who walked with me, hundreds of them. And really, I sure enough was moved to do the holy dance, except the kids said I was twerking, whatever that was.
Okay.
I don't know nothing about no twerking, but I was happy.
Absolutely.
I was so delighted to have that.
Yes, ma'am. May I ask you a question? Okay, go ahead.
So, with you being the grandmother of Juneteenth,
Yes.
you've been pushing this here for decades.
Yeah.
You've been out in the street marching, walking even at 89 years old in tennis shoes.
In tennis shoes.
How does it feel right now to know that the work that you've done,
You have done.
the speeches, the signatures that you have obtained, how is it that you feel, how does it really make you feel right now?
Well, it makes me feel like this that we're doing is not a me thing, it's a we thing.
Yes.
And that it's our responsibility not to rest on our laurels,
That's right.
but to keep going, because there are so many disparities that we need to address.
Yes.
I'm talking about joblessness and homelessness and education, where we need to get books in the schools to tell the truth so that we can heal from what happened and go on about the business of making this the best country in the whole wide world. But it's left up to us. We can't leave it up to anybody else.
Right.
And I preach, each person make yourself a committee of one.
Yes, ma'am.
Because you know there's some person that you work with, that you see, that's in your neighborhood, that's not on the same page that
Yes,
you are on.
That's right.
And if people can be taught to hate, they can be taught to love.
Yes, they can.
And it's our responsibility to get that message over to. Don't say it's going to happen overnight.
We all have a responsibility.
But can you just imagine 1.5 million signatures, and we were prepared to take another 1.5 million signatures, 3 million people on the same page, Oh, that would be awesome.
Yes.
Don't you know? And that if we're addressing these atrocities, that if we're addressing climate change, I'm so afraid that we are desecrating the earth. And I think we're all going to hell in a handbasket if we don't do something better than what we are doing.
Yes, ma'am. How are you raising awareness about Juneteenth Day now that it's been made a federal holiday? What are some of the things you're doing to raise awareness?
Wherever people ask me, I go. Right now, I'm in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, at the Shriners Convention.
Yes, yes.
And I'd probably tell them the same thing I'm telling you, that we've got to work together, that we cannot depend on anybody else to do this, that we must get the truth told, we must heal from it, and we must go on and address these disparities.
Okay. So you wrote a book as well.
Oh, thought you never asked. I don't seem to have one with me. It's called Juneteenth for Children.
Okay.
And so I read to the children in the schools or at the libraries or the community centers. And I got a fistful of them I brought here. They're just not in this room. So I'll see you before I leave here. And
All
you
right.
can get one of those books.
Okay. We want to make sure that we get it. We want to make sure that others have an opportunity, that even if they're not here in Philadelphia, to be able to purchase your book. If there's an online access to it, how much is it?
You go to Opal's Walk to DC, Opal's Walk to, the number 2, DC.com. And you find the link for the books.
Okay. Okay.
I want to mention Dr. Charles Taylor's book. It's Juneteenth, a celebration for the upper classes, you know. And both books have teachers' guides and how to talk to the children about it and all that sort of thing.
Yes, ma'am. I have a question for you. I know that you are the oldest living Zeta in Texas.
Am I really?
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
That's
you
what
are.
we heard.
That's what we heard. So how does that make you feel?
Well, I don't know how to say it makes me feel. I know once a Zeta, always a Zeta. And I'm delighted to be the oldest, because maybe the youngsters will let me tell them something.
Knowledge is power, and we have to transfer that knowledge to our youth. It's very necessary.
Okay. In closing, is there anything that you want to tell us that we didn't, anything that we didn't ask you?
That you want to share?
I just want people to understand that education, I can't say that enough, that we have simply got to instill in our children that education will get us out of the quagmire that we're in. I've heard this phrase so much, we've come a long way. Well, we have, but we got a long way to go,
Yes,
you know?
ma'am.
And it's going to take these youngsters with the technology they're learning. They don't have to be preachers and school teachers and that's all, you know?
Right.
I mean, and so I expect them to take us out of this. I expect them to be able to get people to join together and make this country the best country in the world. I know I've said that before.
No, but we appreciate you sharing that. Miss Opal Lee, we're not going to take any more of your time. We just want to say thank you for giving the Prince Hall Shriners an opportunity to interview you on the Lotus Show. I know Jerome and I are just thrilled that you accepted our offer. Do you have any last remarks, Jerome?
I just want to say it's a privilege to be in your presence, for someone to be such an activist in this country, not just Texas, but across this country, to do what you have done and to be 94 years young.
Yes.
And you still look good and you active and stuff.
Oh,
I just
please.
appreciate you for everything that you've done and everything that you will do.
Yes.
I just know young people, and you heard me say it, that I'm having a good time.
What was that statement that you made when you first came down here?
I said, I'm a little old lady in tennis shoes, getting in everybody else's business,
Yes, you did.
and having a good time doing it.
And with that, we want to say thank you for joining the Lotus Show. And until next time, peace.
Love.
All
And
right.
stay safe now.